If you've listened to this podcast for more than 5 minutes, you already know my nervous system lives on the edge. That's why I love Rise. Between being a mom, a teacher, and a full time researcher of all things sinister and spooky, I need energy that doesn't come with anxiety. My therapist says I have plenty of that already, which is why I love to start my day with Rise. Rise is a mushroom coffee blend that gives me focus without the jitters, and it actually helps me quiet my ADHD brain. It lifts my brain fog and somehow even made my gut health way better. We love a multitasking beverage. I usually drink it in the morning before I sit down to research or record, and it helps me stay clear headed instead of wired. I like to add a little cacao powder, a sprinkle of cinnamon, and of course, my favorite creamer. Then suddenly, it's a delightful little cup of emotional stability. Rise isn't just coffee, it's gut health and nutrition that your body actually craves. With lion's mane, cordyceps, reishi, shiitake, and turkey tail, you'll be saying, "Holy shiitake, I can actually focus," because these mushrooms help maintain focus throughout the day. They help maintain your stress levels, and they even boost immunity while clearing up that pesky brain fog. So if you're trying to kick your caffeine habit or you just want something that's genuinely better for your nervous system, head to the link in the show notes and use my code Suspects and Spirits Podcast 15 to get 15% off your first purchase. What have you got to lose? Again, that's Suspects and Spirits Podcast 15 to get 15% off your first purchase. Your lizard brain will thank you. Hello, everybody, and welcome back. This is Suspects and Spirits, and I'm your host, Taylor Seraphin. We are no longer revisiting old cringy episodes that are hard to listen to. We are back with an all-new topic for your listening pleasure. Bachelorette trip was a success. We had a blast. No one died on a horse or a boat, but there was a lot of drinking and a lot of penises. Actually, I gotta tell you guys. So I got my sister something so fun. You know those little like positive pickles that are crocheted? Well, I found a crocheted positive penis. A little tiny guy. But everyone was like passing him around when she was opening her gifts and they were all, "Oh, look at him. He's so cute." Anyways, you want to make your sister laugh or your friends laugh, just get him a little crocheted penis, okay? Hopefully it's on her desk at work for all to see. It was so fun though. You guys, we saw dolphins on our boat ride. There were manatees. My horse that I rode, his name was Albert, and he was a sassy guy and I loved him. There was a lot of alcohol, obviously, and so much delicious food. Our host, my sister's bestie, arranged for a private chef on the last night to cook, and you guys, you know how I feel about food. And I have never in my life had such good food. I'll be dreaming about that feta whip in the orzo. Holy shit. It was so good. So good. Oh, and I made a horror edit of our trip. So I don't know if I can share that on my TikTok. I'll ask the chat. I'll ask the girls if that's okay. And if everyone's cool with it, then I'll share it. If not, just use your imagination, I guess. I think I missed my calling as a horror filmmaker. Truly Oscar worthy material of the TikTok genre. Anyways, we're back with some spooky tales for you. And what better topic than cursed artwork? Yeah, because let me tell you, there are some paintings I've seen in my life, one which I have saved for the end of this episode, that were genuinely unsettling. So, me, this girl, I thought, what a fun subject to discuss today. Who doesn't love cursed art? You guys ate up the cursed games. You loved those. So, let's talk about some artwork that I would personally never keep in my home. And if you've ever looked at a painting and felt uncomfortable, maybe like it was looking back at you or there was just something unnerving about it, you know exactly what I mean. Maybe you've walked through an art museum and found yourself lingering in front of one of the, particular portraits for too long, unable to explain why you couldn't look away. Or maybe you hurried past a painting because something about it just felt really off and you didn't like looking at it. For me, that's like anything with clowns. As clowns, I want absolutely nothing to do with it. I will walk the other way. I'll punch that painting right in the throat. Not a fan. And actually, as humans, we've been assigning supernatural power to artwork for like thousands of years. Ancient Egyptians believed that paintings could help preserve a person's spirit in the afterlife. And during the Renaissance, portraits became so personal that some believed a skilled artist could actually capture not only a person's appearance, but some of their very essence, like their soul, in the painting. And also, I think most of us know that in Victorian England, morning portraits, not like AM, morning sunshine, like morning like dead, um, morning portraits memorializing the dead sometimes incorporated locks of their hair into jewelry or keepsakes displayed alongside the artwork. And a lot of people thought that actually, capturing a picture in that time, like when cameras were first invented, could steal your soul. So, I mean, across cultures and throughout history, people have wondered the same thing. Can a piece of someone's soul really become trapped inside of an object? Whether you believe that it's possible or not, the idea itself has never really gone away. And throughout history, a handful of paintings have developed reputations that extend far beyond the walls of museums and galleries. People have blamed them for terrifying nightmares, mysterious illnesses, electronics malfunctioning, devastating house fires, financial ruin, overwhelming feelings of dread, and even seeing the figures inside the paintings move. To which I say, fuck that. Don't want to see a painting move unless I'm at the Haunted Mansion at Disneyland. Thank you very much. And at the end of the day, after all is said and done in this episode, you can decide what you believe. So go ahead, grab your favorite drink, get comfy, maybe leave a light on if you're easily spooked, because today we are going to count down some of the most infamous, allegedly haunted paintings in the world, plus a little bonus painting at the end that I just had to include. So let's begin. Our first painting isn't actually hidden away in an abandoned mansion or locked inside a paranormal museum or anything like that. Zach Baggins never got his hands on it. In fact, this one has been reproduced by hundreds of thousands. Yes, people hung it in their living rooms, they hung it in their hallways, their bedrooms for years. It was just another inexpensive print sold in department stores across the United Kingdom until people started blaming it for burning their houses down. Yes, I know that escalated rather quickly. And this painting I'm talking about is The Crying Boy. Now, for my UK listeners, you guys might know about this a little bit more, but definitely if you grew up in the UK during like the 70s or 80s, because there's a good chance you've seen one of these paintings. Technically, The Crying Boy isn't a single painting at all. It's just a series of paintings depicting sad, tearful children. And these were all created by Italian painter Bruno Amadio, who often worked under the pseudonym Giovanni Bragolin. The prints became incredibly popular because they were inexpensive, emotionally very striking, and easy to mass produce. And by the late 1970s, they were hanging in homes all across Britain. And for several years, they were just simple, sentimental decorations. Until, because there's always an until, September of 1985, when all of that changed. That is when the British tabloid The Sun published a front page story with a headline that instantly grabbed the country's attention. It said, quote, "Blazing Curse of the Crying Boy," end quote. According to the article, a family in South Yorkshire had narrowly escaped a devastating house fire. Their home had been almost completely destroyed. Furniture was reduced to ash, the roof had partially collapsed, and nearly everything they owned was gone. It was awful. But when firefighters sifted through the wreckage, one object was still hanging on the wall, and that was their copy of The Crying Boy. It had survived with remarkably little damage. We're talking like you could probably resell it for a fairly good price. It was very spooky, especially because everything in the house was just completely charred and destroyed. Like, how did this painting survive this horrendous fire? Now, this article in The Sun, it quoted a firefighter named Alan Wilkinson, who acknowledged that he had seen several fires where copies of The Crying Boy were found completely intact. His comments, combined with stories circulating among firefighters and homeowners, helped fuel public speculation that the painting itself might be cursed. Now, he never claimed that the painting itself caused the fires, only that people had begun associating it with them. But once that story was published, readers flooded The Sun with letters. One family actually claimed that they had experienced a fire shortly after hanging that painting. Another insisted that they had suffered a string of unexplained bad luck, and others described electrical problems, illnesses, financial hardship, and the eerie feeling that the child in the painting was watching them. The stories became so widespread that many people refused to keep the prints in their homes. And by Halloween of 1985, the Sun announced that it would collect unwanted copies of The Crying Boy from frightened readers. So, of course, everyone was like, hell yeah, brother, we don't want this shit in our house. And thousands of prints were mailed to the newspaper. And on October 31st of that year, they were piled together and burned in a massive public bonfire. Just like imagine that for a second. An entire nation became so frightened by one piece of artwork that thousands of people voluntarily destroyed it. Not because anyone could prove it was haunted, really, just because enough people believed that it was. So, was there actually something supernatural happening? Was this hysteria? Now, if you were to ask, the fire investigators, they offered a much less paranormal explanation. They said that apparently many of these mass produced portraits had been coated with a fire resistant varnish and mounted on compressed hardboard, which means that during a house fire, the string holding the picture often burned first, causing the print to fall face down onto the floor without direct exposure to the flames. So that meant it could survive while the rest of the room burned around it, which I guess makes sense if the actual painting on the front side was untouched. But what about the back side? Why is the hardboard not burned? You know what I mean? Was that also covered in fire resistant varnish? I don't know. It's an explanation that makes sense from a scientific perspective, but it definitely did not stop the legend. And maybe that's because once fear takes a hold of something, coincidence starts to feel like evidence. And for me, you guys know how I feel about those. I don't believe in coincidences. I just don't. I think it's very odd that so many people who happen to have this painting in their home all happened to also experience house fires. And then there's the bad luck, the illnesses, the financial hardships, all of it. So, whether the crying boy was cursed or simply, just the victim of one of Britain's greatest examples of mass hysteria, one thing is absolutely undeniable, and that is very few paintings in history have inspired thousands of ordinary people to throw them into a bonfire. And that alone earns it a place on today's list. Also, just like to clarify, when I say fire resistant or fire retardant, think about it. Okay, this was the 80s, 70s, 80s. So even fire resistant items still burned, especially then, because the term meant that items resisted catching fire from small sources like a cigarette or something, if it were to fall on a piece of furniture or a painting. But if exposed to large direct flames, they would still burn and release a really toxic fume. So back then, to achieve like fire resistance, actual fire resistance, and pass certain tests for safety, manufacturers heavily saturated fabrics and foams with chemical flame retardants, but this only delayed or reduced the spread of small open flames. Again, I say small open flames, like a candle or a cigarette. In a full-blown fire, the items still ultimately burned and released hazardous gases, which could end up killing, the people in the home. I just find it very interesting because they chose a bonfire, right, to destroy all these. Clearly, that's an open, direct flame, and they didn't survive, but somehow they survived a house fire that completely destroyed this home. Like the roof collapsed. People lost everything. Items were completely charred. And that first family we talked about, the painting was still hanging up on the wall. It hadn't fallen down. So you would expect some kind of damage to be done to the painting. But I'm not going to spiral down that rabbit hole with you guys. If you would like to go down that one on your own, Reddit has all kinds of resources for you. And this was probably the least scary of all that I'm going to talk about today because they just get worse as we go, my friends. Now, our next painting is a bit different from The Crying Boy because that one became infamous because thousands of people believed it was cursed. But this next one didn't really have a nationwide panic. It wasn't splashed across newspaper headlines or anything. In fact, almost everything we know about it comes from a single family. And somehow I think that makes it even creepier. So just imagine for a moment inheriting a painting from your grandmother. She doesn't tell you it's valuable. She doesn't tell you it belonged to a famous artist. Instead, she just gives you one warning. She says, don't hang it in your house. And you're like, Grandma, why would you give me a painting and then not let me hang it in my house? That is absurd. Like, where else am I supposed to put it, you know? But that's exactly what happened in this next story. Because according to a man named Sean Robinson, he says that his grandmother had owned a disturbing portrait known as the Anguished Man for more than 25 years. And throughout that time, his grandmother refused to display it in the home. Instead, she kept it wrapped up and hidden away in her attic. And whenever Sean asked about it as a child, she allegedly told him the same story, that the artist who created the painting had mixed his own blood into the paint while he worked. And shortly after finishing it, he died by suicide. So his grandmother believed that the artist had poured not only his blood into the canvas, but part of his soul. I know, very spooky. I don't know if I'd want someone's blood painting in my home. That's a hard pass for me. Now, most importantly, Sean has never publicly identified the artist, and there are no historical records confirming who painted the Anguished Man, which is, to me, it makes it all the more unsettling, along with just the painting itself, because it's real weird. It's not like cute abstract art. There's some art that I'm like, oh, that's abstract. That's really unique. You know, it's kind of dark, but like it's cool. Not this one. This one really freaks me out. I don't like looking at it at all. And don't worry, I've posted all of these to my TikTok/Instagram/ everything else. So if you are brave enough, go take a gander. Again, we don't know who painted the Anguished Man. And for decades, the painting pretty much just stayed hidden. But then Sean inherited it from his grandmother. And like a lot of us probably would be, he was curious. He wanted to open it up, see what it looked like. And rather than keeping it locked away, he hung it up inside of his home. Bad move. Bad news bears. Because according to Sean, strange things began happening almost immediately. He says that his wife started hearing unexplained crying when no one else was in the house. There were heavy doors that reportedly slammed shut on their own. Footsteps echoed through the empty rooms, and one family member claimed to see dark, shadow like figures standing in the hallway before they would just completely vanish. Sean himself also described waking in the middle of the night with the overwhelming feeling that someone was standing over his bed. I hate that. And that's just another reason that I don't want this painting in my home. Not a huge fan of people watching me while I sleep. I don't know about you guys, but I am such a bookworm. I love a rainy day and getting cozy with a new book. I even love the smell of books. And of course, mystery or thrillers are my go to, but finding the time to sit down and actually read them, that's the real mystery. So, as much as I love the feel and smell of a good page turner, I also love Audible. You can listen to thousands of audiobooks, podcasts, and originals while doing literally anything. And the best part, your entire library goes with you. True crime, paranormal deep dives, thrillers, memoirs, whatever your brain may be craving, Audible probably has it. Start listening today by grabbing your free Audible trial through the link in my show notes. With an Audible membership, you get 1 credit every month to download any audiobook you want to keep for free, plus unlimited listening to thousands of podcasts and Audible originals with Audible Standard. So whether you're driving, cleaning, walking the dog, cooking dinner, or spiraling down a late night true crime rabbit hole again, your next story can go with you. Start a free trial today, download the Audible app, and begin listening in minutes. Just check the link in my show notes to get started. Your next obsession is waiting. True Crime Coven, Gooligans, before we get back into this case, I need to talk to you about something equally as addictive as true crime, but like way less illegal. And that is Deutsch cookie dough. And no, I'm not talking about sneaking bites and wondering if you're about to contract salmonella. This is 100% safe, edible cookie dough. Eat the whole container. I support you. I support snacks of all kinds. But this is the snack of all snacks. And you guys know me, I love food. Deutsch is like my own little personal tub of therapy. Having a bad day? Have some Deutsch. Feeling a little sad? Have some Deutsch. Babe, you're not sad. You just need cookie dough. And it's also top 5 allergen friendly, which is fantastic news. Not that I have allergies to any of those things, but if you do, you can eat it. And y'all, it is just as much fun to say as it is to eat, I promise. And you don't have to eat it raw. You can bake it. It's cookie dough. There are directions on the tub. So if you feel a crash out coming on, skip the bad decisions. Don't do that. Grab the cookie dough instead and use my code SPIRITS20 to get 20% off your purchase. Link is in the show notes to get started on your new snacking obsession. I promise you won't regret it. I've already eaten 4 tubs today. All right, stay safe and stay snacky. The family also claimed that their dog refused to go near the painting. Yeah, I know, you guys, I know. What do I always say? So instead of walking past it, the dog would stop and he would stare at the canvas and then just like back away slowly and cower down or tuck his tail. Now, if you've listened to enough paranormal stories or enough of me, you know that animals refusing to approach supposedly haunted objects or places is a theme that comes up again and again. And I always fucking say, trust your pets. Okay. Whether that's because animals are sensing something that we can't or because we're interpreting normal behavior through a paranormal lens, that's up to you. That's up to you, babe. But I trust my pet more than I trust most people. So if my little Rizzo will not go near something, like I know she's scared of trash bags and vacuums and kittens, but honestly, those are valid. You know, vacuums are loud, kittens can scratch, and trash bags also make a loud swoopy noise. So I don't like that either. I'm not a fan of loud noises, but just a painting that they won't go near or like a room that they won't go inside of, nope. We'll need an old priest and a young priest. And our guy Sean decided that instead of calling a professional or just, I don't know, getting rid of the painting, he eventually wanted to document what was happening. And beginning around 2010, I believe it was, he started uploading a series of videos to YouTube showing what he believed was paranormal activity inside of his home. In one of the clips, there were loud banging noises that could be heard while the family searched the house. In another, Sean claimed that a door closed all by itself and that this happened like quite frequently. Other videos featured unexplained sounds, shadows, and what he believed were signs that something connected to the painting had become active. And as you can imagine, those videos spread very quickly through paranormal communities. And I actually remember watching those videos when I was in high school. Millions of people have watched them over the years. And the Anguished Man developed a reputation as one of the internet's most haunted paintings. Unlike The Crying Boy, there aren't hundreds of independent owners telling similar stories about their houses catching fire. And nearly every paranormal claim connected to the Anguished Man comes back to Sean Robinson and his family. And that doesn't necessarily make their experiences false, maybe to skeptics or non believers, sure. But it does make this one of the hardest paintings on today's list to investigate. Skeptics have suggested several explanations, like, the sounds heard in the videos could just be ordinary house settling noises in an older home. As for the shadow figures, some say that maybe he was experiencing sleep paralysis, or it was just low light conditions where things looked warped. And of course, psychologists say that expectation bias can begin influencing how everyday events are interpreted. Still, though, the question that I keep coming back to is if Sean's grandmother truly believed this painting was dangerous enough to hide it in an attic for decades, why pass it on at all? Why would you do that to your grandson? Just why? Why was she trying to preserve a family mystery? Or did she genuinely believe whatever was attached to the painting deserved to stay hidden? Did she think that because he grew up knowing how dangerous it was that he would just keep it locked away? Why not burn it? I don't know. Maybe she thought that that would unleash his soul that was trapped inside. You just can't say. We don't know what grandma was thinking. But Sean probably should have listened to his grandma. I would not have unwrapped it. Well, maybe I would have taken a gander at it because I'm a curious little bitch. But I I probably would not have hung it up in my house. Whatever the answer may be, The Anguished Man remains one of the internet's most debated haunted paintings. And we don't exactly have overwhelming evidence that it's cursed, but because so much of its story existed in the space between documented fact and deeply personal experience, it's hard to argue it otherwise. We weren't there. We don't know what he was experiencing. At least that's how I choose to look at it. Now, I think I did forget to mention that this was also in England where all of this was taking place. Cumbria, England, Cumbria. I think that's how you say it. But to this day, it is currently owned by Sean Robinson. Yeah, he still has it. And I do believe that is a choice. Maybe give it to a haunted museum or something. I don't know. Makes me a little uneasy to think of that being in my house. Now, if this last painting's reputation was built on one family's terrifying claims, This next painting on our list became famous for different reasons, and that is because an entire generation of internet users were convinced that simply looking at a photograph of it could make them sick. So, viewer beware, you're in for a scare. Okay, if you look at this next painting, maybe say a Hail Mary or put on some holy water, sage, Palo Santo, whatever you are comfortable with. Okay, this painting may be the only one I've ever heard of, or at least on this list, that people have claimed can affect you without ever seeing it in person. So, the Anguished Man, you had to see it in person. The Crying Boy had to be in your home, but not this one. This one is so powerful that you don't need to go to a haunted museum. You don't need to go to a cursed house. You don't even need to hang it on your wall. According to many believers, just looking at a photograph of it on your computer screen was enough. When looking at this painting, people report headaches, nausea, nightmares, panic attacks, children crying for no reason, and even electronic devices malfunctioning. Whether those claims are just paranormal hullabaloo, psychological expectation bias, or simply the result of one of the internet's first truly viral ghost stories is exactly what we're about to find out. This painting is called The Hands Resist Him. And oh, baby, one look at this painting and I said, I'm okay. I'm good. I don't need to look any further. I did not want to look at it for too long. I did get a migraine the day that I looked at it. So that wasn't great. Migraines also make me sick to my stomach. So I did experience nausea as well after viewing this painting. But then I said, fuck all that. Get out of my house. You're not welcome here. I do not claim this negative energy. So let's get into it. Okay, let's talk about it. In the foreground, there stands a young boy with a blank, almost emotionless expression. And beside him is a life-size doll with hollow eyes and stiff human-like hands. And beside them is what appears to be a glass door, or I guess like behind them, right? And pressed against the other side of that glass are dozens and dozens of tiny hands emerging from the darkness. They don't belong to visible bodies. They are just there. It feels less like looking at a painting and more like looking into somewhere that you were never meant to see. Very disturbing. So this painting was created in 1972 by American artist Bill Stoneham. I think it's Stoneham or Stoneham. Unlike many haunted paintings, we know exactly why he painted this one. So Stoneham based the young boy on a photograph of himself at around the age of 5 years old. And he says that the doorway that they're standing in represents the barrier between the waking world and the world of dreams. Now, in the painting, there is a moon up in the sky behind them in the window. And I guess the doll wasn't meant to be frightening at all, but he made it really fucking scary. And according to Stoneham, it serves as a guide between the two worlds. And then the disembodied hands behind the glass symbolize countless alternate possibilities in lives waiting beyond the threshold. In other words, the painting was always intended to feel surreal, and it really does when you're looking at it. It doesn't just feel haunted, it feels weird. And this work was first exhibited that same year, 1972, at the Feingarten Gallery in Beverly Hills. It attracted attention almost immediately because of its unsettling imagery. There was an art critic named Henry Seldis who reviewed the exhibition. He also thought it was unsettling. And then the actor, John Marley, who's best known for playing Jack Woltz in The Godfather, he actually purchased this painting. And this is where the legend begins to drift away from documented history into very unsettling, what the fuck is this bullshit? Okay. So over the years, stories spread that both the gallery owner and the art critic died. Yeah, shortly after the exhibition, both of them, after viewing this painting. Now, John Marley also died several years later in 1984, although he was older. He was like 76 when he passed. Now, these deaths are often cited online as evidence that the painting was cursed. And then for years, the painting kind of disappeared. No one really knew where it had gone after Marley passed until sometime around the year 2000, when a California family claimed that they discovered it abandoned behind an old brewery. And according to the family, they thought that the painting looked unusual, but interesting enough to take home. And immediately after bringing this into their home, they said that strange things began happening. Their young daughter reportedly became terrified of this painting. And I really hate this part, but she insisted that the boy and the doll left the canvas during the nighttime. Get rid of it. Get rid of the painting. And sometimes she even claimed that they fought with one another. And then she would also say that the boy would just wander into her bedroom, which, like, we're done here. No, thank you. Please fuck off. Good sir. And at first, her parents really just assumed that she was having nightmares. They were like, oh, you're just having bad dreams. But after hearing the same story repeatedly, over and over and over, her father finally decided to test it. So he set up a motion activated camera facing the painting overnight. And remember, this is like early 2000s. Okay. This camera captured several photographs. According to the family, one appeared to show the boy stepping outside the painting. Another seemed to show the doll raising what looked like a handgun toward him. I'll say that again in case you didn't hear me. The doll was pointing a gun at the dad in the picture. I cannot. Why do people bring these into their homes? I will never understand. If it looks haunted, it's going to stay where it is. I'm not bringing it into my house. So Annabelle Jr. really was just pointing handguns at the dad in the photographs. And these photos would later become some of the most widely shared images in paranormal history. Bill Stoneham would eventually explain that the object wasn't intended to be a gun at all. It was supposed to represent a dry cell battery with wires attached. It was supposed to just be another surreal symbol within the painting. But by then, that haunted narrative had already taken on a life of its own, and I can see why. Now, unsure of what to do with the artwork, the family just listed it for sale on eBay. Oh, eBay, where you can buy all kinds of haunted things. Doesn't Roz Hernandez do like haunted dolls on eBay or something? Like, doesn't she look up dolls for sale that look haunted? I think she does. Anyways, so this family, they listed it for sale on eBay, and that is the moment that everything changed. The listing didn't simply advertise the painting, it came with a warning. So the sellers, obviously being responsible people, were like, we need to explain the experiences that our daughter has reported. And they described the motion triggered photographs. And they even cautioned potential buyers that viewing the images might make sensitive people feel very ill. It sounded like the setup to an internet creepypasta, except this actually happened. So the listing exploded online, as you can imagine, and within days, more than 30,000 people had viewed the auction, an enormous number for the internet in the year 2000. And then the email started arriving. According to the sellers, strangers began contacting them, claiming that they had experienced very strange reactions after looking at the photographs online. Some reported headaches, others described overwhelming anxiety. Several claimed that they felt extremely nauseous. And parents wrote in saying that their children became so frightened of this photo, of this painting, or they would just cry inconsolably after seeing the image. Others claimed that they had recurring nightmares featuring the boy and the doll. A handful of people even insisted that their computers froze or malfunctioned while the auction page was open. And now this is just like a normal thing that people do. They like to auction their haunted items. I guess I say normal, but I don't know. That's it's normal to me. But I really like to go and look at like the haunted dolls and objects on eBay because I think it's fascinating. Now, do I sometimes regret that? Absolutely. Am I still going to do it? Yes. Have you met me? So I decided, my dumbass was like, hey, I'm just going to look at this painting again and see if it makes me feel weird. Do not recommend, actually. Poor Rizzo got a glimpse and she started whimpering, which is weird behavior. So I do not recommend really studying this painting unless you want nightmares and nausea and headaches and you want your doggie to be scared. I really did not mean to scare her. She just happened to be in the room and she was looking at my computer screen. I did not show it to my children because I'm not a monster. I would never. But Psychologists, I guess, have a word for this. They call it the nocebo effect. So it's the opposite of the placebo effect. If you're told that something might make you sick or frightened, your expectations alone can sometimes produce very real physical symptoms. Anxiety can trigger headaches, nausea, dizziness, and muscle no, muscle tension, and even very vivid dreams. So when you combine that with a deeply unsettling image, it's entirely possible that suggestion amplified what people were experiencing. That being said, I don't really know how I feel about the nocebo effect because there have been times where I don't know what I'm looking at. I don't know if it's a haunted item or a place. I may not know the history of, where I'm at, but I feel weird and I feel dizzy and it's not my pots acting up. No, no, that's a very different dizzy. This is a full body, like, a warm feeling is the best I can explain it. So, I don't know if I believe that. I guess, sure, if you're, like, building something up, like, "Oh my gosh, so scary," but then again, that's also been built up to me, and I've been totally fine. I've gone to certain haunted places where people are like, "Oh, the energy here is so crazy," and blah, 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 and I don't really experience anything. I don't feel any dark presence at all. Sometimes, in fact, I feel the opposite. I feel like it's a really lighthearted, very warm, cozy place. So I don't know how I feel about the nocebo effect. I'm sure it happens with some people, who just want attention. I don't know. But I believe in the curse of the paintings. So I am one that is not quite satisfied with that explanation. Now, this painting, back to our topic, eventually did get sold to a gallery owner named Kim Smith for just over $1,000. The painting has been displayed publicly for years now without any verified paranormal incidents, and Bill Stoneham himself has continued to create sequels to The Hands Resist Him, expanding on the symbolic story that he originally intended to tell. So, ironically, the man most responsible for creating one of the world's most famous haunted paintings has consistently maintained that it was never meant to be haunted at all. But perhaps that's what makes the story so fascinating. A single family shared a frightening story, 30,000 strangers read it, thousands more repeated it, websites copied it, forums debated it, and YouTube analyzed it. And over the next 25 years, an ordinary surrealist painting transformed into what many now consider to be the most haunted painting in the world. So, is The Hands Resist Him actually cursed? Or is it one of history's greatest examples of the power of suggestion? Whatever you believe, there's one thing that's very undeniable, and that is very few works of art have ever convinced thousands of people that simply looking at them could change your life. Now, before we wrap this up, I told you there was one more piece of artwork that I could not leave out. A little bonus for you. Not because it's widely considered haunted necessarily. It doesn't move around or whisper or cause nightmares. Well, actually, scratch that. It can cause nightmares. At least it did for me. But this one, it raises a question that's arguably even more unsettling. And that is, can evil leave something behind? Can an object become so deeply connected to the person who created it or the person it represents that simply being near it feels wrong? And that brings me to our bonus painting, one of the most controversial pieces inside of the Zach Bagans Haunted Museum in Las Vegas. You guys might know this one, but it is a portrait of Charles Manson. Now, before you picture Manson sitting in a prison cell painting self portraits, that's not exactly the artwork I'm talking about, okay? As far as I know, he wasn't that great of an artist. John Wayne Gacy, also not a great artist. However, this particular piece I'm talking about was created by artist Ryan Almighty. I know, what a name. Who is known for incorporating uh, unconventional materials into his artwork. So in 2018, Almighty created a portrait of Charles Manson using his own blood as part of the paint. And he also just, are you ready? Maybe just like brace yourself, hold your tatas, hold your booties. He embedded small amounts of Manson's cremated ashes into the finished piece, reportedly placing them in the eyes of the portrait. Mm-hmm. And so when Zach Bagans purchased this artwork, he displayed it inside his haunted museum alongside several other artifacts connected to Charles Manson and the Manson family. Unlike the paintings that we've discussed today, there really isn't a long trail of documented paranormal claims attached to the portrait in particular. There aren't decades of owners reporting fires, nightmares, or mysterious illnesses. Instead, people describe uh, it's much harder to define. And I say that because I've seen it in person. Visitors have reported an overwhelming sense of dread while standing in front of it. That's the best way to describe it. Some say that the room feels unusually heavy. And I would agree. It literally feels like someone is pressing down on your shoulders or on your chest. Others describe becoming really anxious for reasons that they can't explain. And a few have claimed that they suddenly felt nauseous or had an intense urge to leave the exhibit altogether. Staff members have also spoken publicly about the unsettling atmosphere surrounding some of the museum's Manson artifacts. As someone who has been to this museum and seen this painting, I can confirm. It may not be haunted in the typical sense of the word, but it is deeply impactful and deeply disturbing, and it is seared into my memory. That room, the serial killer room, made me so sick to my stomach. Even just thinking about it makes me want to vomit. And then that painting, staring at it, felt like I was staring into the depths of hell. It's such a hard feeling to describe, but you just feel hopeless, awful. Like I had chills all over my body staring at that thing. And there were paintings from John Wayne Gacy and stuff in there too. Like the serial killer room is no fucking joke, you guys. That's a heavy ass room. That was not my favorite. But of course, skeptics would argue that there's an obvious explanation for this. So they argue that, just standing that close to an object containing his ashes could be enough to trigger a powerful emotional response. Psychologists call this emotional contagion. But baby, let me tell you, the contagion I felt was far more than the flu. Okay. It wasn't just an emotional response, it was visceral. The idea that our feelings about a person or event can transfer to objects associated with them is emotional contagion. That is not what I felt here. I wasn't just like, God, I fucking hate that guy and I hate that there's a painting in here with his ashes in it. It wasn't just emotional contagion. It was, I am so sick to my stomach. My stomach is in knots. It feels like someone is squeezing my insides and then pushing down on my body while I'm staring into the depths of hell. Like it was horrendous. Now, emotional contagion, I mean, we do that all the time without realizing it. A child's favorite stuffed animal can feel really comforting, because of the memories attached to it. A wedding ring can become priceless despite being made from an ordinary metal. And likewise, an object connected to someone responsible for horrific crimes can evoke fear, disgust, or unease, even if there's nothing objectively unusual about the object itself. But this is not just a painting. And I hate to say things like he's the devil, because I don't even think the devil wanted him, to be honest. But there is something about that portrait in particular that I just cannot get over. But it is so interesting that throughout history, cultures around the world have just believed that objects can absorb energy, you know? Ancient civilizations believe the same thing. Some paranormal investigators even believe that intense trauma, violence, or overwhelming emotion can leave an imprint behind. And we've talked about that before. We've talked about this limestone, and how it can hold energy. And like I said, I'm a big believer in items holding and absorbing energy. So if I had to choose an explanation, that is the one I would use because I don't know how else a painting could make me feel so physically ill. So, what do you guys think? Can evil cling to an object? Can it be absorbed? Or do we create that feeling ourselves? I want to know. Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts. But that is all I have for you guys today. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of Spooky Things that I find fascinating. If you enjoyed today's deep dive into the world's most famous allegedly haunted paintings, I'd love it if you could leave a rating, click one of those stars, or leave a review. Let me know where you're from. Let me know what you think. I'll give you a shout out on the pod. It really does help more people to discover the show when you just sit down for 2 seconds and leave a review. And if you want even more spooky or true crime content throughout the week, you can find me on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and YouTube by searching Suspects and Spirits or just searching my name. Come join the coven and let me know, which of these paintings would you never hang in your home? In the meantime, be good humans, and as always, remember to trust your lizard brain. Until next time, goodbye.